Welcome to the Crimson Gauntlet, folks. The galaxy's premier death arena, where hope goes to die and insurance companies refuse to even acknowledge your existence. For over 3,000 years, this magnificent monument to poor life choices has claimed exactly 250,000 lives. That's not counting the spectators who died of boredom waiting for someone to actually survive more than 10 minutes. The arena itself is a testament to galactic engineering. Imagine if someone took every nightmare you've ever had, fed them protein shakes, and gave them advanced degrees in creative murder. Crystalline spires pierce the artificial atmosphere, each one pulsing with the kind of ominous energy that makes sensible beings check their life insurance policies. The ground shifts between molten rock and razor-sharp ice depending on the arena's mood, which, spoiler alert, is always homicidal. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted tentacled beings, booms the voice of Zrak the Magnificent, veteran commentator and professional enthusiasm dispenser. His voice carries across 17 different dimensions simultaneously, which is really just showing off at this point. Today marks another glorious attempt at the trials of infinite doom, where brave warriors come to prove that natural selection still has some work to do. His co-commentator, a crystalline entity called Moonbeam who communicates through interpretive light patterns, flickers in what can only be described as sarcastic agreement. The translation matrix helpfully converts this to, oh joy, another organic meatbag thinking they can outsmart several millennia of refined killing technology. Now let's take a little trip to a considerably less murderous corner of the galaxy, Earth. Specifically the suburban wasteland of Phoenix, Arizona, where 17-year-old Jake Martinez is having the kind of day that makes you question your faith in technology. His Wi-Fi router has decided to embrace its inner performance artist and express itself through the medium of complete dysfunction. "Come on, you piece of plastic garbage," Jake mutters, wielding a screwdriver like it owes him money. He's wearing his prized gaming headset, the kind that costs more than most people's cars and makes him look like a cyborg who shops at discount electronics stores. Just connect to the internet. It's literally your only job. The router responds by emitting a sound that can best be described as electronic flatulence. Jake, being a rational teenager, decides the appropriate response is percussive maintenance. He gives it a solid whack just as a brilliant flash of light fills his garage. Three beings materialize from what appears to be a discount teleportation effect. They're humanoid if you squint and don't think too hard about the extra arms and the way their faces seem to exist in dimensions that shouldn't technically be accessible. The lead alien, sporting what looks like a military uniform designed by someone who's only heard color described secondhand, points a device at Jake. Primitive neural enhancement detected, declares the alien in a voice that sounds like it was filtered through auto-tune and bad life choices. Combat readiness assessment, adequate. This specimen will suffice. Jake blinks, still holding his screwdriver. Excuse me, but what the actual? Silence, warrior, interrupts another alien, this one carrying what appears to be a clipboard that exists in several realities simultaneously. You have been selected for the honor of representing your species in the Crimson Gauntlet. Jake looks at his gaming headset, then at the aliens, then back at his headset. The rational part of his brain is screaming something about stranger danger and calling adults, but the part of his brain that spent the last 3 years grinding through Dark Souls games is quietly impressed by the production values. Right, he says slowly. This is either the most elaborate VR demo ever, or I've finally snapped from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Either way, sure. Let's see what you've got. The aliens exchange glances that somehow convey both confusion and professional obligation. The leader shrugs, which is an impressive feat when you have 4 shoulders. Initiating transport, he announces, and Jake's garage dissolves into sparkles that would make a unicorn jealous. Jake rematerializes in what can only be described as a boardroom designed by someone with a serious complex about looking important. The ceiling stretches up into infinity, or at least into some very committed architectural drama. Hovering platforms support beings that look like they were designed by a committee of nightmares and given management positions. At the center of this display of bureaucratic intimidation sits Supreme Overlord Vex Thera, a being so imposing that gravity seems to bend around his ego. He's got the kind of presence that makes lesser beings check their posture and question their life choices. His assistant, a nervous creature called Pip, who looks like a cross between a ferret and an anxiety disorder, shuffles through what appears to be interdimensional paperwork. "Behold," announces Vex Thera in a voice that could make thunder file a noise complaint. "Another challenger seeks glory in the Crimson Gauntlet." Jake, meanwhile, is looking around like a tourist who's accidentally wandered into the wrong theme park. Okay, this is genuinely impressive. The graphics are incredible. Is this Unity engine, or did you build your own? The assembled council members exchange the kind of looks usually reserved for watching someone try to high-five a bear. Pip's tentacles twist into what the translation matrix politely identifies as confused terror. "Your species designation," Vex Thera continues, apparently deciding to ignore Jake's commentary, "is unknown to our records." "From which warrior caste do you hail, creature of the gaming headset?" "Gaming headset," Jake repeats slowly. "Right. Well, I'm from Earth, which I'm guessing isn't in your GPS system yet. And I wouldn't exactly call myself a warrior caste so much as a stayed-up too late playing Elden Ring caste." Pip's tentacles form what can only be described as a question mark. "My lord, there is no record of this Earth in our galactic registry. Should we perhaps reconsider?" "Silence, Pip," Vex Thera booms. "Bureaucratic Protocol 77 Alpha clearly states that any being transported to the Gauntlet must compete, regardless of clerical oversights. The paperwork has been filed. The forms have been processed. The bureaucracy must be fed." Jake nods thoughtfully. "Ah, space red tape. Some things are universal, I guess." "You understand then," Vex Thera says, seeming pleased that someone finally appreciates proper administrative procedure, "that you must face the trials of infinite doom. Many have tried. All have failed. Most have done so in ways that required significant cleanup crews." "Trials of infinite doom," Jake muses, points for dramatic naming. "Very Dark Souls meets Warhammer 40,000. I respect the aesthetic choice." The council chamber falls silent except for the sound of Pip's nervous tentacle ringing. Several minor officials begin placing what appear to be bets, though the currency seems to involve small screaming creatures that are probably better left unexplained. "You seem remarkably calm for someone facing certain death," observes Councillor Grimthak, a being who looks like someone crossed a shark with a filing cabinet and gave it anger management issues. Jake shrugs. "I mean, if this is VR, then respawning is probably just a loading screen away. And if it's real, well, at least it's more interesting than my calculus homework." This statement causes several council members to make what the translation matrix identifies as sounds of existential distress. Pip's tentacles have now formed what appears to be a small nervous knot. "The human displays either remarkable courage or concerning mental deficiency," whispers Councillor Valora, whose voice sounds like wind chimes having an argument. "In my experience," Jake says cheerfully, "those aren't mutually exclusive." Vex Thera rises from his throne, which is apparently carved from the crystallized screams of his enemies or possibly just really uncomfortable office furniture. "Very well, human Jake Martinez of the unregistered world Earth. You will be transported to the arena immediately. May your death be swift enough to avoid embarrassing your species further." "Thanks, I think," Jake replies. "Quick question, though. Is there a difficulty setting? Because I usually start on normal and work my way up." The sound Pip makes can only be described as the tentacle equivalent of a stress fracture. The arena materializes around Jake like a fever dream designed by someone with a serious grudge against architecture. He's standing on a platform that seems to be made of crystallized malice, thus surrounded by stands packed with beings who look like they've come from every corner of the galaxy specifically to watch someone die horribly. "Welcome back to Galactic Death Sports Network," Zrak announces with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners and people who've found parking spaces. "I'm your host, Zrak the Magnificent, joined as always by my co-commentator Moonbeam, who's currently pulsing in what I can only assume is anticipation." Moonbeam flickers a pattern that the translation matrix converts to or indigestion. "It's hard to tell with crystal beings." Jake looks around the arena with the critical eye of someone who's spent way too much time analyzing level design. The obstacles spread before him like a murderous obstacle course designed by sadists with engineering degrees. Spinning blades carve through the air in patterns that would make a mathematician weep. Pools of what appears to be liquid hatred bubble ominously between platforms that probably aren't as stable as they look. "You know," Jake says to nobody in particular, "this reminds me of that one level in Crash Bandicoot. The spinning things, the obvious death pits, the way everything's trying to kill you just for existing." In the stands, A betting pool immediately opens on whether this statement indicates confidence or complete psychological breakdown. The odds are surprisingly close. Ladies and beings. Zrak continues, his voice carrying the kind of gravitas usually reserved for funeral announcements and tax audits. Today's challenger is Jake Martinez, representing the previously unknown world of Earth. He is 17 solar cycles old, which in most civilized systems is considered barely past the larval stage. That's encouraging, Jake mutters, testing the platform's stability with his foot. Though honestly, the physics engine seems pretty solid. Good collision detection on these surfaces. Moonbeam's light patterns form what can generously be interpreted as confusion. Several spectators in the front row lean forward, trying to understand why the human is critiquing their sacred death arena like it's a software product. The trials of infinite doom. Zrak explains with practiced dramatic timing, consist of 4 increasingly lethal challenges. The maze of screaming shadows, where previous champions have lasted an average of 3 minutes and 12 seconds. The pit of razor storms, current record holder at 47 seconds. The chamber of temporal fragments, where time itself becomes your enemy. And finally, should any being prove foolish enough to survive that long, the guardian of ultimate ending. Jake nods thoughtfully. Classic progression structure. Start with navigation and spatial reasoning, move to reaction-based challenges, add some time pressure mechanics, then finish with a boss fight. Very traditional game design philosophy. The arena's AI monitoring system, which has been designed to analyze threat responses and combat readiness, begins emitting what can only be described as electronic confusion. Jake's biometric readings indicate complete calm, which historically has only occurred in beings who were either enlightened masters or completely insane. Previous champions. Zrak continues, apparently determined to maintain his professional commentary, despite the human's bizarre behavior, have included Warmaster Krex Thul of the Crimson Legion, whose death scream could be heard across 3 star systems. The legendary blade dancer Yil Nara, who actually managed to make it to the second trial before being converted into what forensics generously called a fine paste, and who could forget Demolisher Vrak, whose strategy of punch everything until it stops moving worked right up until he encountered something that punched back harder. Ah, the classic Berserker build, Jake observes, high damage output, low survivability. Probably didn't invest enough points in dodging or basic pattern recognition. This statement causes what appears to be a minor riot in the scholarly section of the stands, where several beings who have spent centuries studying arena combat begin frantically taking notes. But enough exposition, Zrak announces, his voice rising to the kind of crescendo that suggests someone's about to have a very bad day. Let the trials of infinite doom begin. May the odds be, well, they're definitely not in your favor, human. Jake cracks his knuckles and checks his gaming headset. All right then, let's see what you've got. The maze of screaming shadows opens before Jake like a geometry textbook having an existential crisis. Walls shift and writhe, defying several laws of physics and at least one fundamental principle of interior design. The shadows don't just exist in this place, they have opinions, most of which seem to involve consuming anything foolish enough to cast them. The maze adapts to each challenger, Zrak explains to his audience, learning their movement patterns and adjusting accordingly. It's claimed the lives of seasoned warriors who spent decades mastering combat disciplines. Jake studies the entrance for approximately 15 seconds. Right, so it's an adaptive AI with pattern recognition. Probably uses machine learning to predict movement based on initial behavior samples. He pauses. Classic mistake in enemy design, really. You always leave an exploit. Without warning, Jake begins moving through the maze in the most illogical pattern imaginable. He runs backwards, hops on one foot, occasionally stops to examine walls that are clearly trying to kill him, and at one point starts humming what sounds like elevator music. The shadows, designed to predict logical movement patterns, begin writhing in confusion. What Moonbeam's light patterns seem to stutter is he doing? I have no idea, Zrak admits, professional composure cracking slightly. He appears to be dancing? With homicidal shadows? Jake emerges from the maze after exactly 2 minutes and 37 seconds, having essentially confused it into submission. Randomized movement patterns, he explains to the stunned silence. Works every time against predictive AI. They can't adapt to true chaos. The pit of razor storms awaits, a swirling maelstrom of blades that move in patterns complex enough to make calculus professors question their career choices. Previous challengers have attempted to time the movements, to find the perfect moment to dash through the gaps. They've all been turned into confetti. Jake observes the pattern for exactly 30 seconds. Okay, so it's a rhythm game. The blades move in mathematical sequences, probably based on some kind of algorithmic progression. He starts nodding his head to a beat only he can hear. The key isn't timing the gaps. The key is moving to the rhythm. And then, to the absolute horror of everyone watching, Jake begins dancing through the razor storm. Not avoiding the blades so much as moving with them, like he's part of some cosmic choreography that the arena's designers never intended. The blades, designed to slice through advanced armor and reinforced bone, somehow keep missing him by millimeters. "This is impossible," whispers a spectator who's been attending arena events for 3 centuries. "The human appears to be treating our deadliest obstacles as entertainment," Moonbeam observes, light patterns forming what can only be described as crystalline bewilderment. Jake emerges from the razor storm completely unharmed and slightly out of breath. "Nice tempo," he comments. "Very waltz-like, though the triple meter gets a bit aggressive in the middle section." The chamber of temporal fragments is where time itself becomes weaponized. Past and future collide in impossible ways, creating zones where seconds stretch into hours and minutes compress into heartbeats. Warriors have aged decades in moments or found themselves moving so slowly that dust mites appear to be traveling at light speed. Jake steps into the chamber and immediately notices something the designers probably didn't intend. "Oh, this is clever. Time dilation fields with variable flow rates. But look at the visual distortion patterns." He points at areas where the air seems to shimmer. The time fields are actually visible if you know what to look for. It's like having a map. He begins moving through the chamber like he's navigating a familiar video game level, stepping into fast time zones to cross dangerous areas quickly, and using slow time pockets to rest and plan his next move. What should be a disorienting nightmare becomes a leisurely stroll through temporal anomalies. He's using the time distortions as tools, Zrak says, voice climbing toward hysteria. Nobody has ever thought to use them as tools. To be fair, Jake calls out, apparently able to hear the commentary despite being in a pocket of accelerated time. "Your visual effects team did excellent work." Makes the whole thing way more intuitive than it probably should be. 3 trials down, and Jake has essentially turned the galaxy's deadliest arena into what appears to be a casual afternoon activity. The crowd has gone beyond stunned silence into what can only be described as existential questioning. The guardian of ultimate ending materializes like a nightmare given form and tenure. Mortis Prime stands 30 feet tall, constructed from what appears to be crystallized warfare and bad intentions. Its form shifts constantly, adapting to match whatever it perceives as the greatest threat. It's claimed the lives of champions, warlords, and at least 3 beings who were technically classified as minor deities. "Behold," Zrak announces, though his enthusiasm has taken on a slightly hysterical edge, "the final guardian." Mortis Prime adapts to any fighting style, counters any strategy, and learns from every attack. It is, by definition, unbeatable. The Guardian scans Jake with sensors that can analyze combat styles across 17 different dimensions of warfare. Its adaptive protocols prepare to counter everything from berserker rushes to tactical magic use to advanced technological warfare. Jake looks up at the massive entity and sighs. You know, this is always the problem with final bosses. They try so hard to be unbeatable that they forget to be interesting. Mortis Prime's scanning intensifies, trying to categorize this statement as either a combat technique or psychological warfare. Its databases contain information on every known fighting style in the galaxy, but none of them account for casual criticism. Jake continues, settling down cross-legged on the arena floor. "Look at you. Adaptive armor, multiple weapon systems, probably some kind of regeneration protocol. Very impressive from a technical standpoint. But when was the last time someone just asked you how you're doing?" The Guardian's optical sensors flicker. This is not a recognized combat pattern. Its adaptive protocols begin cycling through possible responses, but none of them seem appropriate for casual conversation. "Seriously," Jake says, "do you even enjoy this?" Just standing here all day, waiting for people to show up so you can kill them? That sounds like a terrible job. No vacation time, no benefits, probably no one ever says thank you. Mortis Prime systems begin displaying what can only be described as electronic confusion. Its threat assessment algorithms are caught in a loop, trying to determine if empathy constitutes a weapon system. The human appears to be, Moonbeam's light patterns stutter, talking to it. This is unprecedented, Zrak whispers. In 3,000 years of arena combat, no one has ever tried conversation. Jake stands up, brushing dust off his jeans. Look, Mortis, can I call you Mortis? You seem like you've got a lot of personality trapped behind all that ultimate ending business. What do you say we just call this whole thing a draw? I've already proven whatever point I was supposed to prove, and honestly, fighting you just seems like it would be bad for both our health. The Guardian's combat protocols experience what can technically be described as a cascade failure. Its programming, designed to respond to any conceivable form of warfare, encounters something it was never designed to handle: genuine human empathy, mixed with complete irreverence for the situation. Mortis Prime stands motionless for exactly 17 seconds. Then, in a voice that sounds like gravel learning to express feelings, it says, "No one has ever asked me how I am doing." "Yeah, I figured," Jake replies. "That's the problem with being an ultimate weapon. Everyone's too scared to treat you like a person. Or, well, a person-adjacent artificial intelligence with feelings." The arena falls into the kind of silence usually reserved for witnessing miracles or major traffic accidents. 3,000 years of tradition have just been casually dismantled by a teenager treating the ultimate killing machine like a customer service representative, having a bad day. "I do not enjoy killing," Mortis Prime admits, voice carrying across the arena like a confession. "But it is what I was made for." "Sure," Jake says, "but that doesn't mean it's what you have to keep doing. People change careers all the time." Well, people and artificially intelligent entities with existential questions. The Guardian's form begins to shift, not into a weapon configuration, but into something that might generously be called a bow. "The trials are complete," it announces. "The human has achieved victory through methods that were not previously considered possible." The arena erupts into chaos that can only be described as the sound of several civilizations simultaneously questioning everything they thought they knew about combat, survival, and the fundamental nature of conflict resolution. Beings who have spent centuries studying warfare are frantically recalculating their entire philosophical frameworks. "Ladies and beings," Zrak announces, his voice carrying the tone of someone whose worldview has just been demolished and rebuilt in the span of an afternoon, "we have witnessed the impossible. Jake Martinez of Earth has not only survived the trials of infinite doom, he has completed them in a manner that our records indicate is unprecedented, inconceivable, and probably shouldn't be physically possible." Jake, meanwhile, is examining what appears to be a holographic interface that has materialized in front of him. "Okay, this is where it gets weird," he says. "Because either this is the most elaborate VR experience ever created, or I'm looking at what appears to be actual alien currency and property deeds to entire star systems." The interface displays his winnings in terms that make several civilizations' gross domestic products look like pocket change. 3 star systems, a moon that's apparently made of condensed platinum, and what the translation matrix identifies as exclusive mining rights to the nebula of infinite gems. Jake blinks several times. This is real, isn't it? Like, actually real. Not VR, not a dream, not some kind of elaborate prank show. Supreme Overlord Vex Thara materializes via emergency teleportation, looking like someone whose entire understanding of reality has been fed through a paper shredder and set on fire. "Human Jake Martinez," he announces, voice carrying the tone of someone making official proclamations while having an existential crisis. "By right of victory, you are entitled to claim your rewards and territory." "Right," Jake says slowly. "And I'm guessing I can't just take the cash equivalent and go back to trying to fix my Wi-Fi router?" "The bureaucracy has spoken," Pip squeaks, appearing beside his superior with a stack of interdimensional paperwork that appears to be smoking slightly. "The forms have been processed. The victory is officially recognized across 17 different galactic legal systems." Jake looks at the list of his winnings, then at the assembled crowd of aliens who are staring at him like he's just casually rewritten the laws of physics using crayon. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. I don't really need 3-star systems. That seems like a lot of responsibility. And I still have to finish high school. This statement causes what appears to be a minor diplomatic incident among several species whose entire cultures are based around conquering star systems. However, Jake continues, I am willing to negotiate. First, I want Earth officially registered in your galactic database with full protection status. No more random abductions, no more bureaucratic oversights, and definitely no more mistaking gaming equipment for military hardware. Vex Thera nods frantically. Agreed. What else? Niles. Second, I want our internet infrastructure upgraded. If I'm going to be known as the guy who beat your ultimate death arena, the least you can do is make sure my ping rates are decent. The Supreme Overlord turns to Pip, who begins making notes with what appears to be a pen that exists in several dimensions simultaneously. This can be arranged. And third, Jake says, grinning, I want you to offer Mortis Prime a job in customer service. He's got excellent communication skills, and I think he'd be good at conflict resolution. The Guardian, still standing in the arena, makes a sound that might generously be interpreted as pleased surprise. As the galactic news networks begin broadcasting the story of how a human teenager turned the most feared arena in known space into what essentially amounts to a customer satisfaction survey, Jake Martinez looks around at the chaos he's accidentally created and shrugs. You know, he says to nobody in particular, this has been educational. But next time someone offers me interdimensional adventure, I'm definitely reading the fine print first. Somewhere in the crowd, a betting pool opens on whether Earth's warriors are all like this, or if Jake Martinez is a unique anomaly. The odds, unsurprisingly, heavily favor anomaly. But then again, the galaxy had thought the Crimson Gauntlet was unbeatable too.